It's that time of day where everyone's very high energy, except for me. Today we're going to talk about how to hit on shippers, right? So I was hanging out and I was at a lounge and I met this guy and he was an owner-operator and we got to talking and he was telling me about life on the road. He wasn't an owner-operator yet. He was a company driver and he said, I think I want to go be an owner-operator. I said, well, okay, that's interesting. He's like, I'm only taking home $2,700 a week right now, and I think I can make more money as an owner-operator. I said, I promise you, you can't. So I said, where do you think freight comes from? He's like, well, right now my dispatcher gives it to me. I said, yeah, but it's like going to the grocery store and saying, like, eggs come from the grocery store, right? Just because your dispatcher gives you freight doesn't mean that the freight comes from the dispatcher. So what we're going to talk about is where does freight come from to keep carriers moving on the road. We're going to talk about people want to work directly with shippers, and they should. Working directly with shippers it'll fix a lot of problems in the industry, certainly. But it's tough to get in, and it's tough to stay in. It's tough to service the business and be successful. So we're going to talk about how to get in, how to stay in. In full candor, I was walking the floor earlier and there was this beautiful Peterbilt cab over and there was this sign that said, do not touch, but I touched it. And then the whole thing fell down on my head. And now I don't remember what I was going to talk about today, but we'll power through it together. I'm just kidding. So I believe in a world where shippers and carriers work together directly on contract freight and everybody involved makes a good living. So a lot of the technology, a lot of the innovation in our space is focused on the spot market. And that makes sense. It's high friction. But it's only 20% of the freight that moves. And 80% of the freight that moves is contract. It's ongoing, it's regular. And it doesn't get as much attention, but I think that's the blue ocean of opportunity. So fleet owners, operators here, drivers. All right, so this is going to be very focused towards you. Everybody else is going to be bored out of their minds. So if you walk out, I won't take it personally. My mom walked out last time I gave a talk, so it's okay. So when I was a kid, I grew up in the freight world. My dad was a sales guy for Carolina Freight first, and then P-Jacks. This is a Jevic truck. Me and my brother, he outgrew me after this. But we kind of grew up around freight, and we grew up around trucking, and he would take us to driver competitions. He would take us on sales calls. And I think he thought if you brought little kids, he'd get more freight that way. I don't know whether it really works or not, but we grew up going on sales calls and seeing customers and bringing them pizza and bringing them donuts. And so our family business is called Burns Logistics, and we're an asset sales agency. So carriers are our clients. We get them into shippers. We help them get contract freight. We help them through that process. And then we've built this tool called TruSygnal, which is like a dating app for shippers and carriers to connect on contract freight. When I was a kid also, there was this guy who lived near us, and he had a beautiful pole barn. He had a truck, he had a flatbed, he had a reefer. And he was able to get into some local accounts that were pretty big companies. And the reason that he was able to do so is because he didn't mind going and taking freight into the New York Metro. So he'd go drive into Manhattan and the Bronx and Brooklyn, but he charged a little more money. And then, so they pulled the freight from him, they started giving it to somebody else. But the customer's customer called them, the receiver called and said, don't send these guys ever again, send the farmer. We just want the farmer. So they called this guy the farmer. And after that, he got the business back, and it was never an issue again. And I think in our industry, a big problem is that it's been commoditized. People talk about transportation like it's a commodity. Oh, we're selling space on a trailer. And that's really dangerous, and especially carriers need to stop thinking that way, because this is not a commodity business. If this is a commodity business, we're in a lot of trouble, and we're not going to be able to make money. We need to provide a service. Because if you provide a service, you can charge more money and you can charge more consistently, and you're not at the whims of the marketplace, right? So we've had a freight recession for like 4 years, and I think a part of this is because we've allowed ourselves to buy into this idea that we're in a commodity business, and we're not. If we look at it as a service and we provide a service, we can differentiate ourselves. So we'll talk about what that means, but simple things like making deliveries into hard places. That's harder freight to cover. Doing multi-stops, touching the freight. These are all things that are unpleasant, but that means most people don't want to do them. One pick, one drop, dry van freight, it makes sense that gets commoditized because there are lots of people willing to do that. So if we're willing to do difficult things, I think we insulate ourselves from some of the market conditions that we've seen. So why would we go direct with a shipper? Well, right now, I think an obvious one is a lot of times shippers have a fuel schedule. And that's wonderful because when we have fuel where it is right now and diesel prices are going up, fuel is covered by the shipper, right? Every shipper has a different fuel schedule, so you're covered to varying degrees. But with the carriers that I work with, whenever I ask them, like, oh, what do you think about fuel going up? They all say the same thing. Actually make a little bit more money when fuel's up, right? Because the fuel schedule, the higher it goes, they make more per mile. So they're covered. That's a benefit. I think what's more important are the next two, which is network consistency and then pricing stability. So network consistency. When we reach out to a shipper and they say, where do you like to go? And we say, I'll go anywhere for the right price, right? Ever hear somebody say that? Conversation's over. The conversation's over. The shipper doesn't need to hear, I'll go anywhere for the right price, because anybody will go anywhere for the right price, right? The carriers that are profitable exercise network discipline. They go to the same places over and over and over again. And part of the benefit of this is because profits, I think, from what I've found, it's less about the rate per mile and more about how much am I running empty, right? So rates do matter. I'm not saying rates don't matter. But you can blow profitability really fast by running 400 miles for a pickup, right? So empty miles kill profitability. Network consistency, you build the fleets that get to 100, 200, 500 trucks, they all exercise network discipline. And so I was talking to a fleet the other day, and I said, well, how much of your capacity goes to the spot market? He said 4%. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. 4%'s good. I think anybody over 80% customer direct contract freight, you're in a pretty good spot. But if you can get to 96%, I mean, they made money through the last 4 years because of that. I don't think they made as much money as they wanted to, but they still made money. And the pricing stability, right? So again, there are bad shippers out there, and there are good shippers out there, and there are shippers who don't care to work directly with carriers. That's fine. You'll find that out. But there are good shippers out there who will pay the same rate regardless of the market. And what they expect in return is that you will service their business at the rate that you committed to, regardless of the market, right? So if somebody's giving you freight right now at $220 a mile, and that's what you committed to for the year, and then you come back 3 months later and say, you know, the spot market's really hot and I got to go to $240. I mean, that's a great way to never do business with that shipper again, because they're relying on you, you're relying on them, and there are shippers out there, they don't go to bid. They move freight at the same rate with the same carrier, in and out, and they don't pay attention to what spot market rates are. So that's doable, it's possible, and I think if we get off the spot market drug and say, oh, rates are so high, I'm going to go chase it, we'll be able to more consistently make money. So when I was a kid, the traffic manager would get a pack of Marlboro Reds, black coffee that I know it had oil in it, a notepad and a pen, and they'd go out and they'd see who was bumping docks near their facilities, right? And they write down, oh, this carrier, this is their DOT number, and then they go back to the office and they call them. Now, it's probably, Zinn or Vape is this, and the transportation procurement manager, right? So it used to be traffic managers, now it's like transportation procurement or some other title. The way that people buy has changed. Fundamentally, over the last 20, 30 years, the way that people buy has changed. Our expectations are very different. And so we see that very much in transportation, and we see that in the procurement role, right? So there's an aging demographic of people who did things a certain way, and they're largely aging out. And so reality in trying to work directly with shippers is dealing with that. Now there are, from when I was a kid, and we'd go out on these entertainments, and we'd take people to hockey games. Well, now some companies don't allow that. They don't allow gifts or entertainments that are worth more than $20 or whatever it may be. So we absolutely have to navigate that. A lot of people put their phone on Do Not Disturb, or, hey, don't call me, just text me, right? These are things we have to navigate. We have to navigate the reality that people are inundated. People in this role are inundated, and they've been inundated for a long time, and particularly in the last 4 years. So I talk to shippers, and one of my favorite questions they ask is, how often do you get solicited? One guy, he moves like containers, plastic containers. He said, I get 50 to 60 calls a day. What do you do with them? I ignore them. And I mean, that makes sense. What else are you going to do? So we'll talk about this, but that has to be broken through, right? How do you get in front of somebody who's getting that much noise day in and day out? A lot of these shippers at companies, are the transportation managers, they're getting 100 emails a week, right? So to break through via email and be so spectacular that they respond to you is very difficult. So there are difficulties with working directly with shippers. Like, it's not perfect. And the first difficulty that we encounter, once we've gotten through the conversation and we say, yeah, let's work together. It's a very laborious contracting and onboarding process, right? It can be very difficult. And people will give up during this process. You just got to fight through it. The other thing is, I see a lot of carriers just sign the paperwork with really big companies. Some of them European owned, they just sign the contract because they're going to get the freight. I would read those contracts because there are a lot of details that are important around liability, how you're getting paid, payment terms. And the other piece too is some of these shippers, they may have 45 or 60-day payment terms. And if you push back on them at this point, they may give in. If you say, look, yeah, okay, 45-day payment terms, my rate is X, but 30-day payment terms, my rate is X minus 5. What do you think? And they may take the higher rate at 45-day pay, that's okay, but we'll talk about this as well. Knowing your costs is so important, and sharing those costs with the shipper is vitally important, right? Shippers need to understand why 45, 60, 90-day pay is more expensive. And you need to come in with the data when you have these conversations and say, the reason that I need to charge more money for this many day pay is because this is what it costs me, right? And have that conversation intelligently. I think a lot of people go to, and I see this right now because there's a lot of people asking for rate increases. Why do you need a rate increase? Well, because the market's tight. No. Like, why do you actually need a rate increase? Well, my costs are up X percent. I have these other options. I'm losing money here. And if you can drill that down to the lane level, look, I don't need more money on this lane, but tolls went up on this lane, and that's what I'm looking to cover, right? Just go through line by line. And you're far more likely to get a rate increase when you're in with the shipper when you're able to break it down that specifically. Again, payment terms can be very difficult. I mean, how do you move freight at 120-day pay? It just doesn't really work. So it's something to be aware of. And then gatekeepers. There are lots of gatekeepers in shipper organizations, from when you're trying to have the initial conversation to trying to invoice and get paid. So some of the shippers, if you ask for them, they'll give you an org chart with contact information and escalations. So I would ask for that. But navigating who is who at these organizations is very important, and I think something that people gloss over. So we can't just show up and say, here I am, let me move your freight, right? You see some couples out there and you're like, I don't know how that happened, right? Well, how it happened is somebody's adding value somewhere, right? And that's what we need. That's what we need to do. We have to add value to our shipper customers, and the way that we do that is, one, we can make a problem go away, right? Difficult service lanes. I'm finding it a lot of times right now with multi-stops. A lot of carriers are just unwilling to talk about doing multi-stops, but there's a huge need for them, and shippers are willing to pay more money for that. So that could be a problem. The problem could be that they don't like their current provider because service isn't there. There could be a pricing issue. I think price is kind of dangerous, because if the shipper is willing to leave an incumbent that's providing the proper level of service, if the service is there and they're leaving for price, then they'll leave you based on price as well. And then difficult freight, right? So we put together, I had a friend of mine come to me, he said, look, I've got this customer, they're moving stuff LTL right now, the claims are really high. Sometimes it's hazmat, sometimes it's reefer, and it's all moving LTL. So what we put together was we got a carrier who said, I will make it's a 3-stop pickup, 2-stop delivery. It's going to be a reefer every time, because sometimes it's reefer. The driver's always going to be hazmat. We'll only charge the hazmat or reefer accessorial when there's a need, right? It came together and it worked because it was difficult freight. They weren't getting the service. There were a lot of claims, right? So finding those kinds of problems and helping to make them go away makes it a lot easier to get the business. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult on the operation side. But fortunately, I'm not talking about operations, so we don't have to worry about that for the sake of this conversation. So how do we get in there? How do we get into a shipper? 4 things that I think. 1, we need to stand out. 2, be persistent. 3, we need to be specific. And 4, we need to solve a problem. So these are just a few ideas for how we can stand out. Shippers are getting inundated with people who say, I'll move freight anywhere for the right price, and I could, Mr. or Mrs. Shipper, I'm so good at moving freight, let me just move your freight. And it's just all this bad, AI-backed automation in sales, constant solicitations, and they shut down, right? Which makes it very hard to break through. So I think email is next to impossible to stand out through at this point with how much people are getting solicited. Different things you can do. There's this guy, he owns a poultry farm, and I went to him one day, I said, like, well, how do I stand out to customers? And he said, well, are you sending postcards? I was like, no. He was like, you idiot, start sending postcards. And I was like, that never occurred to me. Why am I? But so he said, every time you travel somewhere, you pick up a stack of postcards and you send them to your customers and your prospects, and you say, I was here doing this and I thought of you and I'm going to bring back more value because I was there. So I started doing that. And guess what? It works. It works pretty well. People like postcards. I think things that are harder to do stand out more. That's why I have thank you notes, handwritten letters. We do swag boxes. We get cardboard boxes that have our brand on them. We put giveaways in there, and it gets a response every time. Stacy is our admin. She's a wonderful lady. She's very good at crunching data, but she also has this spectacular gift for baking. So I know she really likes one of our customers when she says to me, get me their address and what their favorite cookie is. But guess what? If you send people homemade cookies, it makes an impact. And I'm not saying you have to do something outside of your comfort zone. If you hate baking, don't make cookies and send it to the customer, because nobody likes bad cookies, right? But these are little things that you can do to stand out. Making an actual visit, I think, is making a comeback. A lot of people didn't want that for a while, but I think it's starting to make a comeback. Who here is active on LinkedIn? Okay. LinkedIn, shippers on LinkedIn, they just lurk, okay? They're not going to engage in anything you say. They're not going to respond to anything you do. They're not going to like your posts, but they're going to see everything. So I would go in with that expectation. Don't expect a lot through LinkedIn with the customer, but they're going to see what you're doing, and it's going to set you up for a much more productive conversation. We have a form on our site that we get carriers reach out to us to see if they want to use our tool. And what I've been astounded by lately is like, you want to go work directly with shippers directly, but you're using a Yahoo or an AOL or a Hotmail or a Gmail account. And like, if shippers don't go for that, I mean, they are looking for trust and reliability, and part of, if we go back to the way that people buy has changed, the way that people see the world has changed insofar as we look at things digitally, and we verify information through digital means in a large way. Particularly shippers do this. So the first thing a shipper is going to do when they get an email from you is click the link to your website. And if there's no website, and there's so many carriers that have a broken website, or if they do have an email address that's professional, if you just copy and paste that after the it goes to a blank page. Like, you don't have to spend a lot of money to build a fancy website. All you just need a landing page with your contact information and some high-level information, which you can do very inexpensively right now. It's not expensive to do these things. It's not expensive to go to Namecheap.com and buy a unique URL for your business and to get an email set up that is professional. And these things really do matter to shippers. And then the last thing is just managing your Google listing, which is where people will leave reviews for your business. I think many people overlook this, and it's not that hard. It's not expensive. It's free, actually. And people look at these things. Persistence always wins, a nice dose of persistence and patience. If you're sending cookies or you're sending postcards or you're sending letters, one and done doesn't do it. We need to consistently follow up. Freight is a really long sales cycle, right? So sometimes people say, well, I just want to move their freight. Well, if they just closed an RFP, the win is not to start moving their freight next week. The win is to get on the list to get invited to the RFP next year. Because the shippers have a cycle for how they procure capacity, and sometimes we just need to ride that out. It's not as simple as, hey, I've got trucks, you've got freight. Let's make it happen. Sometimes it takes a long time to start moving freight. Sometimes the win is just get into a mini bid. So I think you want to understand from the shipper, like, what is your bid cycle? How often do you onboard carriers? How many carriers will you onboard this year? In addition to, what problems do you have that I can make go away? Be very specific. I think it's important to be very specific with shippers, because they're getting that I'll go anywhere for the right price all the time. So if you can tell them specifically, I run from this market to this market, I run from Dallas to Chicago 5 times a week with reefers, then it's a simple yes, no. And they might say, no, I don't have a need for that. Okay, well, you know what I do. The more specific you can be, it's okay to get a no from a shipper. It's okay to get a no from a prospect. It saves both you and them a lot of time. So specificity in the ask. Here's where I have capacity. Here's my service offerings, right? And within this, like, just a little bit of research into the shipper online can help you understand what modes they use, where they have facilities. So when you reach out, say, hey, I know you have this facility in San Antonio, and it looks like it's regional stuff. I've got trucks in San Antonio, and I would do regional stuff, right? Like, that's a good place to start as long as it's true. And again, solving the problem. The key in getting, if you can get to the point of having the conversation with the shipper, what we've found is, like, we make it very clear. If you're getting your freight serviced at a rate that works, please don't have us quote it, because we don't want that business. If it's working for you, keep it with your incumbent. Because if you're going to pull it from them for me, you're going to pull it from me for somebody else. The next piece of this that I think is vitally important is having honest conversations in any relationship, right? We say how to hit on shippers. Really, it's you want to get married to the shipper. You want to get married to the shipper as a carrier, and you want to work together for the next 20, 30 years. So you have to have some honest conversations up front as you're starting to do business together, right? So does the shipper understand their total cost to service the business, right? So there's the paper rate, and then there's what's the cost when things go wrong, when there has to be a recovery, or when it's late to the shipper and there's a fine. What's the real cost? You know, what's the cost of falling down the rate guide when tender rejections go up, right? So when you offer a rate, it's to take all the freight that they give you. If they promise you 100 loads a week or 100 loads a year, you want to take 100 loads a year. I think the carrier needs to share with the shipper, this is my required revenue per day. The shipper should know that. Not only should the carrier know it, and I think far too many carriers don't know this to the penny, but they should not only know it, but they need to share it with the shipper, because you need to be able to have very specific conversations about rates. If you need $1,100 on the truck for the day, and they're looking for $850 for something that's going to tie up a truck for a day and a half because the receiver's a pain, it doesn't work, right? And you need to tell them that. You need to tell them why. Being very clear about how the freight operates. Understanding from the shipper, like, what does it look like to be successful as a carrier with you? So I like to ask, like, what do successful carriers have in common for you as a shipper? I was talking to one shipper recently, and they said, you know, price, service, okay, that's you know, everybody talks about those things, but man, I just need somebody who's going to communicate with me when something goes wrong. And we're really struggling with that right now. And it's not that hard to pick up the phone and say, hey, we're running late, and here's why, and here's how we're going to make it right. Problems happen, but that gets under-communicated so often with the shippers. And so I've seen some of these shippers start to scorecard based on communication. So I think being communicative and understanding what they need from a service level and from you as a provider is very important. Knowing operating costs for the carrier and being very clear initially with the shipper to understand, does this actually work for our business? Does this freight fit into our network? Is it something we want to do? You know, is this a commodity we want to haul? Or is this can we afford the insurance on this? And I think both parties need to understand, to work together successfully, carrier needs to say, hey, we're providing a service, and the shipper needs to say, yes, and I'm buying that service. If you're both on the same page that this is a service, it's going to go a lot smoother. And damn it, don't get distracted by spot rates. You know, they're so enticing, but chasing the spot market, the carriers that have been around for 3 generations and 80-something years or 100 years, they are very contract heavy. They're not growing you can grow to a certain fleet size, I think, by chasing the spot market if your timing is right, but chasing the spot market will not lead to long-term growth. And in every relationship, there are problems. So I think some bedrock fundamentals, going back to that communication with the shipper, they need to trust you that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and you need to be able to trust them that they're going to give you the freight that they said they would. And you need to be able to communicate with one another if things aren't working or if it doesn't line up. I highly recommend, if you get into a shipper and start working with them, at 3 months in, ask them for a service review call. In fact, demand it. There's so many carriers like, yeah, the freight. It's like, oh yeah, the freight's kind of working, and let's let sleeping dogs lie. I don't think that works. If you're proactively asking the shipper for a review call, it's a great opportunity to tell them where the freight operates well, where it doesn't, where it's working, where it's not working. Are we getting paid on time? Do we have the right contacts for this, this, and this? And a lot of times, what I found on these calls is it turns into, well, where else can you help me? I've also got freight here. Can you do that? No? Okay, well, how about here? Well, how about here? And it's usually that 3-month check-in is usually an opportunity to just get a little bit more freight. The presupposition of working with a shipper for a really long time is you're going to look out for them, you're going to help them operate better, and it's going to be a win-win for you and for them. If you see a place where you're making a little extra money, but you could save them some money if whatever that may be, do it. Save them some money. If you deliver on your promises and they deliver on their promises, they'll get to know your network better. They'll become advocates for you. Good shippers will help carriers find other business and speak well of them to other shippers. So I just think that constant communication is vitally important. Thank you so much for being here. Do we have any questions?
What size of a carrier do you think it really starts to make sense to go for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I know a pretty big shipper who uses a one-truck owner-operator to do temp control multi-stops because it's a route he can't get anybody else to do it, and it kind of works. I think 40 to 50 trucks is like almost a no-brainer. Most shippers big shippers have a minimum, right? So some it's 50, 60, 80 trucks depending. Usually that minimum is higher for dry van than it is for refrigerated. I mean, if you're running flatbeds with one truck, I think if you find some local manufacturers, I think you can go direct pretty quickly. I don't think you need a huge fleet to add value there. But I think 40 to 50 is a safe bet. If you have 20 to 25, some small to mid-sized shippers will let you in. And if you're doing something niche-y, then your chances are better. Anyone else?
Sure.
Yes.
So you say not to chase the spot market.
Yes.
What kind of discounted rate are you seeing for contracts?
Like below spot right now?
Yeah. Are you talking below spot, above spot? What are you asking?
Yeah, I mean, contract rates are probably below spot in most markets right now. Yeah. But that's why, like, if your operating cost is truly, your true operating cost is $195 a mile, for example, like, I talked to this guy, he said, how much money does somebody need to make on a truck per day? I was like, I don't know. He said, $25. I said, what do you mean? He said, if you can make $25 per day on a truck, they'll make $10,000 a year on that truck. I was like, that doesn't seem like a lot. He's like, yeah, but guess what? It's a lot better than losing $3,000. I was like, okay, that makes sense. But if you map that out on like 10 or 15 or 100 trucks, like minimum, you're saying this is minimum, I think that makes sense. Like, we can't lose money, and I think how you run your business is up to you, but yeah, you can make more money on spot right now, but I don't know anybody making money on spot the last 3-4 years, so I don't know. What I'm advocating for is stability over volatility in a market that is addicted to, a lot of people addicted to the roller coaster. And I mean, some people like that, and that's okay, but roller coasters make me sick. So, and I think they're really hard on businesses too, and families and livelihoods. Yes?
Do you see contract rates creeping up with the rise of?
Yes, I do think contract rates are starting to go up, yeah. I also think shippers are expecting slight rate increases. They're bracing for it. Yeah, contract rates are starting to creep up.
Are there still shippers in denial?
Yeah, they're all in Egypt. I'm just kidding. Yeah. There are shippers in denial. There are always shippers in denial. And I think what I've seen is shippers who have executed a bid and have delayed the bid results. They were trying to figure out, like, oh, is this real? And I don't think they have a paddle right now. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
I say one thing that I've struggled with is that I've been in sales most of my life, but I went out to some local manufacturers right in our area. We're just an owner-operator.
Yeah.
But accessible. Yeah, I couldn't even get in front of anybody. Traditionally, that was never the case, when I was in sales in another industry. But you can't even get past the front desk half the time anymore.
Was this over the last few years?
Oh, yeah, just within this last year.
Yeah. I really think...
I even went in with candy, a sell sheet, my card, a conversation, and I couldn't even get to the right people.
You got to switch the kind of candy.
Lindt chocolates? I mean, come on.
Oh, my. Who could say no to that? I really believe keep doing it. Keep doing it, because I think the pain is going to get pretty bad in the next 3 to 6 months, especially with some of this enforcement going on. If this is legitimate, they're going to be feeling a lot of need for what you provide, I think. Please don't give up. Anyone else? Yes?
What do you do when you work directly with a shipper and you have, terms that they pay every 15 days? Well, then they take it out 90 days, 100 days. You start, asking where the money's at, and they just put you in you. I mean, where's the happy medium with getting paid versus not getting paid?
Yeah. I've seen this more with like European-owned companies. I think at some point you have to be willing to walk away from the business. If you're getting paid in 15 days and then they're like, oh, now it's going to be 90, I think you can go to them and say, like, look, I can make 30 work. Can we do 30? But yeah, ultimately you can't operate a business on a 100-day pay. Yeah, so we're going to hear a lot more right now about shippers of choice, I think. That term really went away over the last few years, but shippers, it's going to make a comeback now, shippers who want to be a shipper of choice. And one shipper I talked to, they understand, because they have 30-day terms, but they have, but their actual time to pay is 27 days. And they know that that's their competitive advantage as this market swings, because their competitors are not going to get capacity because they have that 60-day pay. So I really think in part of the rate negotiations, every carrier who has a rate negotiation with a shipper who's trying to push out payment terms needs to be willing to say, here's my rate for 30 days, and here's my rate for whatever silly terms they have. And if it's 45-day or 60-day or 100-day, you should give them a different rate, and it should be a lot more. Yeah, I think the fortunate thing is we're getting into a marketplace where it's easier to find something else. So before, in the last couple of years, it was harder to walk away from business. I think it's going to be a little easier to walk away from business for something better. But I think it's important to tell them why. They need to understand why you're walking away. I don't think we communicate enough with one another in this industry right now, and I think explaining why things cost what they do is really important. So if you walk away from business, just tell them why. Anyone else? Justin, do you have a question, or are you just stroking that magnificent beard of yours? All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. Oh, yes, certainly.
So that the small carrier working with smaller shippers,
Yeah.
what's your recommendation on how to find those shippers that match your size?
Well, I would start locally and just pull lists of businesses nearby. And I mean, you can like go on Better Business Bureau and stuff and find. But what kind of commodity, what kind of equipment do you have?
Single truck, single driver, drive-in.
Drive-in? Yeah. I would just go visit people. Drop a card off, say hi, tell them what you do. Just keep, yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.